Welcome to the brand new episode of the Tech Ketchup Show, a Nerd for Tech Originals. Through this show, we are trying to bridge the gap between industry professionals and people who wish to make into the industry of technology and business. In today's episode, I have with me Mr. Yashraj Tyagi, Chief Technology Officer at Kashi. In this candid conversation with Yashraj, he tells us about the innovative and not so usual idea behind Kashi, and he also discusses about the technology stack that is being implemented by Kashi to solve one of the most basic problem of instant personal loans. In this candid conversation, Yashraj also tells us some noteworthy points on team building and product development. Enjoy this podcast till the end and follow Nerd for Tech for more such amazing conversations. Welcome, sir, to the podcast, the Tech Ketchup Show, and I just hope we have a great conversation today and you enjoy yourself with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kushagar, for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. Looking
Oh,
forward to the invitation.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, sir. To begin with, sir, I would like to take you to a few years back when you first for the first time engaged with technology, and how did you had that kind of a love for technology start, and what was that actually developed that excitement inside you for this technological stuff, and then your entire journey till Kashi, where you are a CTO. So how that has been.
Yeah, sure. So that's definitely an interesting question. And just like just a lot of people, I was also doing my engineering at BITS Pilani, Goa,
Okay.
and I went in with thinking that I want to do electronics engineering, although that's not what I ended up doing. Even though and that's true for a lot of people, in fact. But the thing is that this entire journey of being in an engineering institution, meeting people who are like-minded, who are innovative as well, who are creative when it comes to technology, that really,
Mm,
really forces you to think that, what do you exactly like to do? And
mm,
so my interest is a lot over the 4 years. But one thing that I was consistently, now since you asked me about my initial college days, one thing that I was consistently involved in terms of starting new initiatives, in terms of technology as such, and was essentially in the direction of having very practical, skill-based learning programs. Because what I've realized was that a lot of education that you get in engineering is definitely pretty great in terms of setting a solid foundation. But what people lack is the kind of hands-on experience in terms of what
mm,
is actually required on the job. So I started a few initiatives like that whilst I was in college, and through that, in fact, is where most of my learning also happened. When I used to see that, okay, this is what somebody is doing in virtual reality, this is what somebody is doing in AI, this is the kind of machine learning tools that are being used in finance, in healthcare, and media. And
mm,
because I used to guide students to actually work on those projects, and meanwhile I used to get a lot of that exposure as well.
yeah.
And that got me really, really interested in this domain, as of data science and machine learning as a whole.
Mm,
And towards my end of my third year and my final year of college, I kind of realized that this is something that I would want to do in this domain, but not exactly what, like, or which company.
mm,
And my exact role and the exact my exact use case that I ended up working in, that I would really credit to having found the correct mentors who kind of guided me in the right direction. And that is, I think, fundamentally very important for people who want to kind of know where they want to go into, but like kind
mm,
of want to go in the right direction. That kind of mentorship really, really helps. So I will credit to that. So with that kind of mentorship backing, I figured that data science and finance is something that is really, really, really excites me as well. And see, throughout my undergraduate as well as right after that, what I figured was that I want to work in a role where you use technology directly in a B2C environment, because actually seeing your innovations directly impact and make lives better out there is probably, there is no greater joy than that,
mm,
right? And that is what I ended up wanted to work in. And financial services as such is one such domain in which this kind of an innovation is really, really possible, because the kind of financial inclusion that India has is not that great right now, and it has rapidly been increasing in the last 3 years, primarily because of the kind of fintech companies that have come up in various domains of finance. And what credit me as well. And then I went on to do my master's in financial engineering itself from Berkeley, and then which I completed this year, and then I rejoined Cashy as CTO after that. I really like the growth story in India. I loved working at Cashy because of how the company has scaled up, how we have really put out innovative solutions out there, and how much there is a lot more to do even going forward. So that is my overall, just to say in brief, my overall journey from college to where I am right now.
Yeah, that's great. So, like, what is actually the kind of problem that you are solving with Cashy, or like, what is that actually the problem statement that you are trying to figure out and then implement solutions with Cashy?
Sure. No, that's definitely an important question. And to put it in perspective, everywhere in almost all emerging markets, and definitely in developed countries, you have, as you would be knowing, traditional credit bureau scores. Like you have a CIBIL score, you have Equifax and all of that. And everybody who's ever taken any kind of credit or has had a credit card, they would have some sort of a credit score. Now, at the end of the day, this credit score is what a bank or any financial institution for that matter would look at when they want to give you credit, or, like whenever you apply it for any kind of credit from a bank, whether it be credit card or a personal loan, automotive loan, housing loan. Now, at the end of the day, if you look at that perspective, at this credit score in general, all banks have a threshold below which they would not lend, because a credit score is ultimately considered to be an indicator of your creditworthiness. And the higher credit score, the more creditworthy you are. And, if you talk about CIBIL, a study 1 year ago showed that for most banking institutions in the country, 700 approximately happens to be the threshold below which 700 on the scale, or on the entire CIBIL score scale, happens to be the minimum threshold below which they would not give you money. And only 10% of India's population who actually have a credit score above 700. And I'm only talking about people who actually have a credit score. Then that only 10% or less of India's population actually has a credit score. So we are talking about a very, very small section of population that is actually being serviced by the formal financial institutions. Now, what happens to the rest of the people? It is not that they don't need money. They definitely need money, right? They go to your usual loan sharks. They borrow from friends, relatives, unorganized lenders who, if you see the reports lately, they are lending at 200% per annum, which is obnoxious in terms of the interest rates, right?
Insane.
So how do we bring these people into the fold of the formal credit ecosystem? How do we still give out money to them? How do we make them come into the formal Indian credit financial ecosystem, right? So that is a problem we're trying to solve, and that is a very, very vast, that is a very big and very pressing issue that we need to solve out there. And as I said, every day you lend out to, even if you lend out money to 1,000 people, that 1,000 people you have changed lives for, because you've actually now given access to money they probably not have had, right?
Exactly.
So we are now targeting, again, this is a huge section of population, right? So within that, what we're trying to target is young salaried millennials who do not have access to credit, or do not borrow from banks, because there is, except for the problem of not having access to credit because of unavailability of credit scores or having bad credit scores, there is also an equally big problem that India is very, very rapidly moving towards a consumption-based economy. And the middle class, the salaried millennials belonging to generation of yours and mine, they are the people who spend the most using credit cards and spend most on credit. And and people who do not have credit cards, they still want to spend on credit. So now, again, we're talking about short-term, low-value loans. Will a bank give you, say, 45,000 rupees for 2 months? It would not, right? That's not any of the bank would do that. We would give you 15,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees for 2 months, 3 months, 5 months. So we're trying to give out short-term, low-value credit as well to actually support this consumption-based demand that is rapidly coming in. So that is what we're trying to do to enable instant credit for young salaried millennials in India. That is our goal.
So like, what are the kind of solutions and approaches that you are actually taking to solve this problem? And then talking about a bit of the technological domain that you are actually using to implement your solutions.
So yeah, I mean, like that's definitely the next part of this entire thing. And if you speak about technology, right, there's a very critical piece. It becomes the most critical piece, in fact, in this entire ecosystem, because now if you look at it, as I said, as I give you the examples of credit scores and
Mhm.
how people do not have credit scores and all. Now think about, suppose I am one of those people who does not have a credit score, has a really bad credit score. Suppose I have a credit score of say 400. Like
Mhm.
nobody's going to lend me that. And
Mhm.
that might have just happen because I had one credit card and I did not pay 3 bills on time because I was not aware of that. But now I can't do anything about it. My credit score has gone bad and I'm locked out for life. So what do I do then? So in that case, a company like Cashy, for us, that is a problem we're trying to solve. Like we're trying to give money to still give Cashy is still trying to give money to me in this scenario. Even though I am credit worthy, there was just some genuine reasons because of which my credit score actually went
Exactly.
down. How do I make that possible? Now, if you look at all my previous indicators, right? If you look at my credit card bills, if you look at how often I've been paying them, will I've been paying them on time or not, all of that looks like, okay, I've not been paying my credit card bills on time. And that is the
Mhm.
reason my credit score has gone down.
Mhm.
So if you look at those usual financial patterns, um, I would still not get money from anywhere. And that is unfortunately what any bank or any other traditional institution would still look at. So what we
Mhm.
said is that we are going to tackle this problem from a completely different perspective. What we are going to do is that we are going to use alternate behavioral data of people coming from the smartphones, coming from social media, coming from geographic indicators to see the social behavior as it comes from all of these parameters, all data sets accessed via explicit consent.
Okay.
And then after that, we try to see that can we actually correlate any kind of these behavioral indicators that come from your actual live smartphone behavior or social media indicators and other information that you give us, does that relate to your financial behavior? And
Okay.
that is where actually our entire core AI piece comes in. Because
Mhm.
you need to have very robust and sophisticated real-time AI-based credit scores, which we call the SLQ, which is a social loan
Okay.
quotient, which is an alternate credit score that scores people real time and tells you whether you are credit worthy or not. Depending on where you
Mhm.
rank. Somebody might have, like me, I might have a CIBIL score of 400, but I might
Mhm.
have an SLQ score of 850, and I'll get money, right? Because
Mhm.
Kashi has seen that using my behavioral indicators, I'm doing pretty well. There might be some genuine reasons because of which my civil score would have gone down. And that is
Mhm.
exactly how we are enabling access to credit for people. And
Okay.
it is the other way around as well. We have, in fact, seen that people who score really high on Equifax or CIBIL, like people who score 800, like ultra prime,
Mhm.
they might have a low SLQ score. They might have like 300 on the SLQ. And
Oh.
that, in fact, has shown up as bad customers for us. Like those people have actually gone ahead and defaulted. So, for
Mhm.
our kind of case, short-term instant credit, an AI-based behavioral indicator for predicting credit worthiness is actually what works out.
Okay. Awesome. So, like, what I feel as a CTO, apart from being the technological head of a organization, there are a lot of responsibilities on the part of leadership and mentoring to the team. So, like,
So,
how do you get that balance of dealing with technology and actually working yourself on something, uh, and then actually motivating your team, guiding your team to do some kind of a work that could be beneficial for the organization as a whole?
that's a very interesting question, in fact, and this is something that I have to deal with on a daily basis because you know, and this is like a lot of my friends also who are in similar positions at me
Hmm.
have had problems with because it's like at the end of the day it's your passion for technology that brings you to this role, and you do
Hmm.
not want to completely give up on doing something yourself hands on
Hmm.
in and just get a step back and just manage other people doing it, just
Hmm.
like me. I make sure that there is some amount of work in some domain of the company. Like for me, it is data science and AI that I do
Hmm.
myself, and I make sure that I am releasing code as part of every sprint, and I am actually committing code to our repositories and shipping
Hmm.
code as part of it. So as part of my work as well, and doing that, is definitely difficult, and it boils down to a lot of a lot of things that have to be managed pretty well. Some of the things that are very key, especially in startup environments, is, and I'll start from the basics over there. Some of the points that are very important over here is that is hiring the right kind of people. Because when you talk about technology teams in startups versus technology teams working in multinational companies, which have like 200 people working in every single technology vertical, whether it be DevOps, app development, backend, there might be like 200 people working in all of that. But now when you're talking about a lean team with probably 4 to 5 people over there, you need to bring in people who are innovative, who can manage processes end to end, and who are driven more often than not. So you are in fact hiring technology leaders. You are trying to hire people if tomorrow who can step into your shoes as well. Right. So you're trying to hire people who come with a drive to actually deliver value to the company, who agree with the company's vision, who definitely come with a very, very solid skill set, can manage processes end to end, and have a very steep learning curve. So that being said, one of the things that I agree with, and I tell my team all the time, that when I look at hiring somebody, I look at hiring not for the y-intercept, but for the slope of the curve that a person has, because that shows how fast somebody can learn, right? And if you just look at the y-intercept, or by y-intercept I mean how much somebody already knows, you might just like narrow your search down to a very, very small set of people who might not be the best fits. In fact, I don't think I might not have got this role back in 2017 if people who are actually guiding me this were looking for my y-intercept, because it was close to 0, right? So so that is very, very important. Actually that you always look at learning potential of people. So when you bring these kind of driven, motivated people with a good learning curve, who want to deliver value, who can manage processes end to end, what happens is that you don't need to dive into every single thing that has happened in your company. You can manage the vision or the broad line projects in terms of technology within your team. You can say that you had dedicated teams working on different projects. You can say, okay, fine, this is what we need to do. This is how we tackle it. These are the problems these are the problems that might come in as we work through this, but we'll tackle them as we go ahead. But then that you have people who you can leave the job to, right? And they will deliver it. They'll get back to you in case they have problems, and we will regularly keep working through that. So you need to have more technology operations leaders, as I call them, within the company as well, who can actually do the work parallelly along with you, and you are just there to guide them, right? So that is very important. That is an ongoing process for any company, for that matter, which is a startup or which is a mid-sized company.
Okay, awesome. So now the next thing which I wish to know, whenever you are working on a new product or a new feature for Cashy, then there are these brainstorming sessions and ideation phase going on. There are product developers involved, product analysts, different levels of people. So how important do you feel it is to have a person from this technological background to put in his ideas or his inputs in such kind of a conversation? And what's the importance of inputs that he might give, and which could help in improving the idea that you're working on, or which might also get you some better ideas actually?
Oh, sure. So these are really good questions that you're asking me. These are things we deal with on a daily basis, in fact. And there's always a thin line between how you want to actually get business perspectives and product management perspectives into the technical mix, and how do you actually work, and deal with that problem. And it's very important for a very good mix of business, product managers, and tech to actually come together to deliver a product that has the best possible value. And any more of any excessive of any one of them might actually skew the product and might not deliver the kind of value you had expected it to be. So from all that, it is required to have a very dedicated effort in understanding that what exactly are they looking for? What exactly are looking for? Like a lot of times, in fact, you see that in a lot of companies, that is exactly not, people are not clear with. They say, okay, we want to do this, but that's all they know about. Like, you need to be much more specific that what exactly are you looking for? Like what we said is that we want to deliver products that will fuel the consumption demand for young salaried millennials in India, right? That was a broad use case. But now we have, like multiple products that do that. And when we launch a particular product, like, we're launching a credit card product, or we're launching, one particular 1 year kind of a loan for our customers. There is a lot of research that has to go into that. There has to be business use case to that, is there a business use case to that? What is the competitive landscape around it? How are we going to tackle that problem? Who will be the probable customers for that? And then there is a product management perspective, that how do we structure this product so that it is most seamless for the customers to use it? How do we exactly build the user journey to be the most seamless out there? Can we instantly give credit to people for 1 year, which will be an insane thing to do, because this very rarely that you see out there in the markets. A bank will probably give you a 1 year loan within a matter of 10 minutes, but we are doing that, right? So how do you do that? You need to have a very, very seamless user experience and structure your product in the best way possible. And then comes a technology perspective, that how do you actually enable all of this via technology? What are the best technology tools that you can use so that you have again, like you are able to enable that kind of the user experience. You are able to enable whatever the business has envisioned, and you can bring more value-added services on top of that. So now, when it comes to product management, see, I think that, and this is an opinion that I have cultivated over a bit of time, that it works best when you have product managers who know the in and outs of technology till a certain extent, and that really helps because, and that is why you see that people who have worked in technology domain to a certain extent know about in and outs of tech, or have worked in tech teams, make really good product managers, because then they know when they speak that they want this feature, what they're exactly looking for, right? Otherwise, there will be a big communication gap between a tech team versus a product team, because they are looking for something that they don't know how it will get implemented actually.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that is why I always tell my team that we have product managers, we have a very solid product team, we have a very solid tech team, and I always tell my team as well that even if you do 10% of product management in terms of thinking from a user experience perspective, thinking of in terms of the user interface, thinking about how the user journey looks like in terms of the products that we are developing, how do we exactly make the product seamless to use, that really adds a lot of value, because now you have people who are engineers who are actually involved in the trenches of developing that. Now actually thinking on a much broader perspective, they're zooming out and thinking that how they can actually go ahead and develop excellent products out there. So that really helps you. And the last thing that I would add here is that all of this involves that one thing that will enable all of these things to happen very well, but not a lot of people do that, which is picking up the phone and speaking to your customers. People don't do that. That is the most important use case out there, that that these are the guys you want to target for your product, whether it be technology or whether it be product or whether it be business. You speak to your customers and figure out whether they actually want this product. You do surveys on them, you understand their needs actually, and you understand that is the tech that they are actually seeing on the app right now, does that work fine from them? Would they have expected something else, right? And then you go and develop them. Because see, I and other people in the company might not be the customers of that product, right? So whatever we think might not be how people want to actually have that product. And that is why speaking to your customers in this entire product development life cycle is crucial to the success of the product.
Okay. So since you have been interacting to people a lot, talking to people who are in this technological domain and interviewing a lot of people, what do you think what are those values that a candidate who is applying to for such a position actually lacks, apart from even if he is technically strong or has the entire requirement that an organization wants, but what are those values that you feel on a general basis that a candidate actually lacks nowadays?
Correct. So I would not speak that I would not say that people lack in general. People lack those things in general nowadays, but I think that in fact the kind of skill sets that we look for generally have been increasing lately compared to what you would have seen 4 or 5 years ago. But like I said, when you're looking at hiring for starters and lean teams, when the people that you're hiring for would be a part of a sub vertical that has probably 2 to 3 people, you want people who can really create and drive a lot of impact over there. They might be really good on their technical background. They might have good technical focus, but you also want to drive a lot of value out of them, right? So,
Exactly.
So when I personally look at people, and that is, it's probably the same across, high growth startups in general. When you are trying to hire for lean teams, that, one, tech skills definitely matter. But as I said, learning potential or the slope of the learning is really, really important, because you now want people to step into that job and learn really fast, because it is very natural to assume, and you will be unfair to your candidates if you want them to actually have come in with an experience exactly of the kind that you're trying to hire for, because that's not very common, right? Like, how many people would have worked in developing technology solutions for availing instant credit for millennials in India? Not many, right? So now you're trying to hire people who have a very, very steep learning curve. Knowing the learning curve while taking the interview is a difficult thing, but also very important. The second thing is out of the box thinking. Like, a lot of people take their designations very seriously and think that, okay, fine, if I am a software engineer, I am supposed to, do this much of whatever I'm assigned for, and that's it, right? So that is not what we're looking for. What we want to do is out of the box thinking, that the tech stack now. What products we have, what can we do next, what will be the next delta that we take and go to the next step now. So knowing how much impact somebody has had previously, or gauging the kind of impact somebody can have based on the kind of ideas they have, based on how driven they are, that is crucial to the success of the team as well as the success of the product. And third and very important thing is a culture fit, because now you again have a very lean team, correct? And you want to have people who can work very, very well in a team. That they are solid, thoroughbred team players. That that you will put them in this team, and they will do everything they can to actually make sure the team is successful. It is not it is we that actually matters over there, right? So, so hiring those kind of thoroughbred team players, it again becomes really crucial. So now, if you see, I'm only talking about the soft side of technology. I'm not talking about the technology skills, because that is easier to find. These soft skills are actually what makes a person successful in this environment. And we have seen that people who actually possess these skills have a very steep growth in the company as well. They make a good career for themselves. They have a lot to speak about, because now you are one of those people who have actually scaled the company through the years. And not many people have that to the credit. And that's a very, very good thing to speak about. So that is what we're looking for.
Awesome. So now after this post-COVID session, do you feel, is there any technology or any domain in particular that is going to see a lot of rise, or that might see a lot of learners and developers coming into? Any field that you feel that could have taken a bit more time to get boom, but would now be growing, engaging very fast after post-COVID?
I think that that's an interesting question, and there has been a lot of recent comments by quite a few people on that as well. Now there are two things where we can look at this, right? Like, one would be specific domains and industries as a whole, and then there would be skills that you're speaking about. Exactly. So obviously, we have seen that there have been certain segments or certain kind of business domains that have performed exceedingly well, like those that offer remote working solutions. Obviously, they have done really well. Then you have, work collaborative platforms like Slack and the like, which have done very well, because now people want to collaborate on remote platforms. Then you have also services that offer, basically delivery of services of the likes of Urban Clap and stuff, which because people don't want to step out, they would want rather the services to go to them. So this is something that is done well in the short term. But in the long term, what we see a demand going towards is that, there are a lot of broader macroeconomic impacts of COVID as a whole. Because what we have just spoken about, what I just mentioned right now, is just about people staying in their homes and wanting to work from their homes and trying to get as much done, but not stepping out. So these are the things that that have gone up because of that. Now, there are broader macroeconomic impacts of that. How people, there has been a lot of job loss in the market. There has been a lot of salary cuts that have happened across the board. There has been there would have been a huge increase in the the average credit that the person holds, because to cover the expenses in an event of salary loss, they would have taken up more loans, they would have racked up and maxed out the credit cards. So there has been there's a broader macroeconomic scenario that will start to kick in now, because you would have seen that the RBI gave out moratoriums to people and said that you can pay our EMIs late and all of that. So all that happened, and now we are slowly going to see the impact of all of that kicking in. So how does that impact the startups? What kind of opportunities that create would be very interesting. But the point is that you have to be prepared for that, and that involves a very shrewd and a very and very deep understanding of how the Indian financial ecosystem, the macroeconomics in India works like, correct? So for that matter, you can just giving an example that you have people in prime credit scores 750, 800 who would have lost their jobs, because job cuts have happened across the board. Now those people, in the event of a job loss, now would not be able to pay back their existing obligations. So it might be personal loan EMIs, credit card EMIs, and all of that. And when that happens, their credit scores in CIBIL are definitely going to go down. So they might now get into this near prime category, right? And they might go below the prime category. They might into the 650 CIBIL score, 600 CIBIL scores, and things like that. So who tackles that customer now? Who tackles that customer base now? Are banks going to still look into that? I don't think so, because they are very risk averse in general. They have traditionally been risk averse even in the advent of these kind of crisis scenarios. So now there's a huge opportunity in which we are looking into that kind of a segment, that yes, we want to cater to that segment, because that is the only way you can actually bring these people out back into the prime category. You can actually help them out and make them prime credit rated again, because we are still lending to them without the credit, irrespective of the credit scores. That is just one of the examples. So there will be a lot of these broader macroeconomic scenarios that will kick in. So that is on the industry side of things. And now if we talk about tech skills, all of the supporting tech skills will also become important, because I don't think that unless you're talking about multinational BPO companies, which rely primarily on contractual kind of obligations to actually, get their work done. If we're talking about, firms like us, we have an increasing demand of actually hiring people across verticals, because as you see your business demand grows, you still want to hire people across verticals, whether it be data science, whether it be DevOps, or whether it be software engineering, everything for that matter. So I think that is true across the board. There'll be these skill sets, which will keep becoming important over time. Still.
Yeah, that's great. So that was great having you. So on the show, just a last one, because this is a tradition at the Tech Ketchup show. Could you just recommend any resource, be it a podcast or a speaker that you usually listen to, or some books that has actually helped you a lot, not just in your professional career, or in general, just becoming a better person? And so please, if you can.
So I would not recommend one resource, because I think that one of my favorite hobbies of all time, ever since I remember having hobbies, have been like voracious reader. So I read quite a bit actually, and I would suggest that you do read books that have been put out by people who have actually scaled up big companies. And if you talk about one particular book, the one recent one that I was reading was the book by Bob Iger, like the person who actually built and scaled up Walt Disney. He has got some amazing lessons in there about like scaling up teams, building strong teams, and actually scaling up companies at a multinational level. If I have to name one of the books, this is one of the most recent ones that I read. Then before that, I read Shoe Dog, which was about Nike. Not the most recent, but again, pretty solid book in terms of actually understanding the entire culture of entrepreneurship and actually building up some stuff. So you can and then you obviously have a ton of resources in terms of podcasts on Spotify, a ton of resources on YouTube, which you can obviously access. I would not choose any one of them, because I think that I keep shuffling across all of them myself as well. So that is there. So that's probably what I would recommend.
Awesome. Well, thank you, sir, for joining us on the show. It was great having you. I hope you enjoyed it.
For sure. Thanks a lot, Kushag, for having me. It was a pleasure being here.
It's an honor, sir.
I wish you best of luck for your podcast and for your initiative.
It's an honor, sir. So to all our listeners, who whatever platform you're listening to, just share, like to listen more such content. And this is Kushag Srivastav, your host for the Tech Ketchup Show, a Nerd for Tech Originals. Signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.